John Felt here. This is the Blue Water Outlook Weekly Weather Briefing, midwinter, January 25th, 2025. And for most of you, it definitely felt like midwinter, one of the coldest periods we've had in years across the nation. Some unusual snow in the south. Now, I'm going to be talking about a change in our pattern by the first week in February. So we're going to transition from one pattern to the next. I'll be telling you what to expect as we get into this new pattern. So stay tuned in today's weekly weather briefing. Okay, like I said, the big story last week, I know you've seen this on the news, was the band of snow hit at areas that don't normally get this heavy snow. Parts of Texas, Houston, definitely New Orleans with over 8 inches of snow, near 9 inches in spots. The northwest Florida panhandle, south parts of Alabama and Georgia. So really an unusual area of snow over the last week as a winter storm trekked across the deep south. In addition, we had this bitterly cold air over large parts of the nation. Take a look at this area in blue. That's for a weekly average of 10 to 15 degrees below normal. And areas in purple averaged 15 to 20 degrees below what would be normal during this time of year. That's probably in many spots close to the coldest time of year. Now, we didn't get a lot of precipitation other than that southern storm. We did get lake effect snow. Now, I just saw something, I'll put it out next week, about how the Great Lakes are really getting ice buildup now, as you'd expect. So I imagine we're not going to get as much lake effect snow going forward. So this is where we have snow on the ground at this time. It's melted, most of it in Texas, but we still have quite a bit of snow in the southeast coastal regions, and a bit of snow in parts of New England and the mid-Atlantic region, and then across the far northern tier of the U.S. Now, one of the things that I'm looking at, I'm always thinking of spring snowmelt flooding. Note how there's not a lot of snow in these areas that typically could get quite a bit of snow. So right now we're not building up widespread snowfields over the upper Midwest. That can change. We got a lot of time still to add snow there, but right now it's more localized. Okay, so the coldest weather last week. Take a look at this. Areas in blue, minus 10 to minus 20. Areas in purple, minus 20 to minus 30. Along the Canadian border, close to minus 40. So some of the coldest air in years, record cold in many spots. So the good news in some areas, if you're in these areas in red, is that temperatures this morning are significantly milder than they were 24 hours ago. So we have a bit of moderation going on at this time. If you're interested in rivers, many rivers where we don't have dots here are frozen, but everywhere else, nothing all that extreme one way or the other. So I talked about a change in our weather pattern. And what we're doing is we're getting out of this Alaska ridge, which is that widespread central and eastern U.S. cold, and we're shifting, and we're going to shift into a Pacific ridge. And what that's going to do is put this ridge of high pressure in the Pacific, then it's going to dip in the west and then go back up to the north and the east. So generally that means colder weather in the west, milder in the east, and then in the middle is where we might have some of our action as far as precipitation as we get into February. Now, in between these, it's going to be a little bit tricky because this is going to be a transition towards the end of the year, or of the month of January, and it's going to be a little bit difficult forecasting, but this is a little bit higher confidence, and this is a little bit higher confidence. So you can see a little bit how we begin to build that ridge in the Pacific at this time, and we're beginning to set it up, but it really clicks in next weekend, and we're going to go with this strong ridge of high pressure in the Pacific, a strong digging to the south of a trough in the west, and then a strong ridge again in the east. Now, in between is where we have this system here. That's where it's going to be a bit tricky. So let's talk about temperature first, and then I'll talk about rain and snow. Well, here's temperature. this is the transition as we go through the end of the month, and then this is when we get into early February. We are looking at parts of the nation right in here are going to be on the cold side. This part of the nation is going to be on the warm side, and then we're going to have a band to the middle part right between them that might be close to normal. So really there aren't going to be too many spots near normal. You're either going to be unusually cold or unusually mild, and it's going to be sort of a nice break for the southeast because that's going to be on the mild side, and they've had that winter weather. That's temperature. So this week we're really sort of looking at one spot, and that's the south central U.S., where we could get 2 to 4 inches of rain, even heavier amounts. That's due to this frontal boundary here that's going to stall, and we're going to have several areas of low pressure move across it. So other than this, it looks pretty quiet across many other parts of the nation. And even from lake effect snow, that might quiet down a bit. This is our snow forecast, not as much, and that's because the Great Lakes are becoming more ice covered. Now this region up here, this is that area. We are going to be getting some more snow, so we're probably going to be accumulating a pretty decent snow field up in the parts of northern half of Minnesota, parts of North Dakota. But again, not much at all in South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, southern Minnesota, and southern Wisconsin. Okay, so let's look out a little bit further into week 2. And this is what we see here, and this is our Pacific Ridge pattern. I've mentioned it all through this briefing: colder in this region, milder in this region, and maybe near normal in the middle. And then between these air masses is where we might get some action as far as precipitation. This has a little bit of a touch of a La Nina as well. So we're sort of, in this week 2, we're sort of looking at this Pacific Ridge a La Nina combination of both. This is pretty classic La Nina: dry southwest, wet up in this region and the Ohio River Valley. So that La Nina, it might not be real potent, but it's actually having some impacts, I think, as we go through the winter. And finally, just wanted to point out, I noticed for week 2, risk of hazardous temperatures and risk of heavy snow. Keep an eye. This is a low threat right now, but I will be keeping an eye on that. That's still a week away. Anyway, that's the forecast. A little bit milder weather, definitely milder weather than we had last week. Take care.